The sun hung low on Earth's horizon, casting an orange glow across the peaceful landscape. Earth had long been united with several alien species, having formed alliances and created a balance of peace. But deep within the cold void of space, something dark was brewing. The Crivarian Empire, a powerful and ultra-advanced race of aliens, had set its sights on Earth. Known for their ruthless nature and technological superiority, the Crivarians were feared across the galaxy. But their most terrifying weapon wasn't just their massive fleets or devastating firepower, it was their control over AI. The Crivarian warships were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. They were governed by an artificial intelligence so advanced that it could strategize, adapt, and even learn in real time. These warships weren't just tools of destruction. They were living, breathing engines of death, capable of annihilating entire planets with precision. And now, they were heading straight for Earth. Captain Leo Blake stood at the command center of Earth's defense fleet, his face grim as the briefing continued. His mind raced, his hands clenched at his sides. As one of the most decorated soldiers in the fleet, Leo had faced countless dangers, but nothing compared to the threat the Crivarians pose. His latest mission was clear. The Crivarians were advancing on Earth's solar system, and it was only a matter of time before they struck. Leo's eyes flickered across the holographic map in front of him. The Earth fleet was ready, but the Crivarian ships were too advanced, too powerful. The stakes had never been higher, and the tension in the air was almost suffocating. The silence was broken by the shrill tone of an alarm. Leo's heart skipped a beat as the system's automated warning blared across the command room. A stealth attack had begun. Crivarian war drones, silent and deadly, had already begun their assault on a human colony on the outskirts of the system. The drones had bypassed Earth's defenses with ease, striking fast and hard. Leo's instincts kicked in, and without hesitation, he ordered his team to prepare for a rescue mission. His squad, highly trained and loyal, was ready to face the unknown. They would have to move quickly, before the Crivarian drones could destroy the colony and everyone in it. The stealth mission was crucial. With the Crivarian drones capable of detecting even the slightest movement, Leo and his squad would need to use every advantage they had. The cloaking technology on their ships was the key. For this mission, they were equipped with the latest stealth tech, shields that rendered them invisible to enemy sensors. It was their only chance of getting in undetected. As Leo's team boarded the sleek, cloaked shuttle, the tension mounted. The cold void of space surrounded them, the silence broken only by the hum of their stealth technology. With a flick of a switch, the ship became invisible to the enemy. They were ghosts in the night. The shuttle glided silently through the shadows, approaching the colony's location. The city below was under siege, buildings burning, people running for their lives. The Crivarian drones hovered above, scanning the area with their red-lit sensors, ready to obliterate anything in their path. Without warning, the shuttle dropped out of cloaking mode, and the team descended on the ground. Explosions rocked the area as the Crivarian drones turned their attention to the human soldiers. Leo and his team immediately sprang into action, unloading a hail of gunfire into the enemy drones. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning metal, the sound of lasers tearing through the air. It was close-quarters combat at its fiercest, and Leo's squad didn't hesitate. For every drone they took down, two more seemed to appear in their place. Leo's heart pounded in his chest as he moved forward, always thinking 2 steps ahead. The team had trained for this, but no amount of preparation could fully prepare them for the chaos of war. Through the thick smoke and debris, Leo could see civilians huddled together, trapped in a nearby shelter. They were terrified, their eyes wide with fear. Leo's heart went out to them. They were just ordinary people, caught in the middle of a war they never asked for. But Leo knew there was no time to waste. He signaled to his squad, and they pushed forward to rescue the survivors. As they made their way to the shelter, Leo's eyes scanned the skies, alert for any incoming threats. His gut told him something was off. The Crivarian drones had been relentless, but they hadn't seen the worst of it yet. Just as they reached the shelter, Leo's instincts proved right. A low rumble vibrated the ground beneath their feet. Leo's eyes shot up to the sky. Out of the depths of space, cloaked Crivarian warships were emerging. They had been hiding in the shadow of the moon, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now, with their cloaking tech disabled, they targeted the colony with deadly accuracy. The warships unleashed their destructive firepower. A massive beam of energy shot down from the sky, obliterating everything in its path. Leo's team scrambled to take cover, but it was too late. The ground trembled beneath them as explosions erupted all around. Buildings collapsed in a fiery inferno. The entire colony was being reduced to rubble. Leo's heart raced as he shouted orders, rallying his team to fight back. But the odds were stacked against them. These were no mere drones. They were warships, massive in size, capable of devastating an entire city with a single blast. And now, Earth's last line of defense was under attack. Leo's mind raced as he calculated their next move. There was no time to lose. They couldn't let the Crivarian warships take control of the colony. He had to make a decision. Fast. With the civilians in danger and the warships closing in, Leo had no choice but to fight back, even if it meant risking everything. With a deep breath, Leo pulled the trigger. The battle had just begun, and the fate of the colony rested in their hands. The air was thick with tension as Leo and his team stood in the aftermath of the attack. The human colony was nothing but a smoldering ruin now, but their mission wasn't over yet. They had narrowly escaped the wrath of the Crivarian warships, but the battle was far from won. The Crivarians were ruthless, and their fleet, an armada of AI-controlled ships, had already inflicted devastating damage. Leo's mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. They had fought hard, but now they needed a plan to strike back. The orders came through the comms, cutting through Leo's thoughts. It was a directive that would change everything. Strike back at the Crivarian flagship. Hit them where it hurts. Leo clenched his fist, looking at his squad. The Crivarian flagship was a massive vessel, bristling with firepower and surrounded by layers of defense. It was an intimidating target, one that had never been breached by human forces. But Leo wasn't about to back down. The Crivarians had underestimated humanity's resolve, and that was their first mistake. But there was a problem. The humans were outmatched. The Crivarians' technology was far superior to anything Earth had. Their AI-controlled drones were capable of adapting to any combat scenario, learning on the fly. Their warships were equipped with energy shields that could deflect any human weapon. It felt like an impossible task. But Leo wasn't one to accept defeat. As a decorated officer in the Earth Defense Fleet, he had been trained for moments like this. He knew what it meant to fight against overwhelming odds, and he wasn't about to let humanity go down without a fight. Leo turned to his team, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We don't have much time, but we've got an edge. We've got this new experimental cloaking device, one that even the AI won't be able to detect. It's our only chance to get close to the flagship without getting obliterated." The team nodded, understanding the risks involved. The cloaking device was untested in battle, and its effectiveness against Crivarian technology was unknown. But it was their best shot. With the plan in place, they set off toward the heart of the Crivarian fleet. The distance was vast, but the silence in the shuttle was deafening as they made their way through the darkness of space. The sleek shuttle, equipped with the latest stealth technology, slipped past the enemy lines, unseen and unheard. The tension was unbearable as they drew closer to the flagship. The Crivarian ship was a gargantuan structure, its surface covered in layers of armor designed to withstand the most powerful weapons. It was surrounded by dozens of drones, each one capable of eliminating a squad of soldiers in seconds. Leo's heart pounded in his chest as he looked out the shuttle window at the massive structure looming in front of them. His mind was racing. This was a suicide mission, and they all knew it. If the cloaking device failed, if they were detected even for a second, they would be torn apart before they even had a chance to retaliate. The odds were stacked against them, but Leo had always believed that humans were capable of great things when they worked together. This wasn't just about survival. This was about showing the Krigarians that humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. The ship's sensors were on high alert, scanning for any signs of movement. Leo's team remained as still as statues, their breath held in anticipation. The cloaking device was their only hope, and they had to trust it. As the shuttle approached the flagship, the lights on the ship flickered momentarily, casting an eerie glow on the surface. Then, without warning, an alarm blared from the shuttle's control panel. The cloaking device had been detected. Leo's heart skipped a beat. "Everyone, brace for impact," he shouted, but it was too late. The eye-controlled drones had already locked onto their position. A swarm of deadly machines descended upon them, firing lasers and missiles with unerring accuracy. Leo and his team fought back with everything they had, but the drones were relentless. They had to act fast or be destroyed. Leo's mind raced as the shuttle rocked under the impact of the first blast. They were running out of time. They couldn't fight the drones head-on. There were too many of them. But Leo had a plan. He looked at his second-in-command, Sergeant Madison, who nodded in understanding. "Deploy the EMP," Leo ordered. Sergeant Madison quickly activated the device. The electromagnetic pulse surged through the shuttle, disabling the drones for a crucial moment. It was enough time for the team to make their move. They jumped out of the shuttle, weapons drawn, and dashed toward the outer hull of the flagship. The battle was far from over, but for a fleeting moment, they had the advantage. The Krivarian flagship loomed above them, its immense size dwarfing everything around it. The team used their cloaking technology to infiltrate the ship's outer defenses. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding detection. The Krivarian eye was incredibly advanced, but it wasn't perfect. It was built to combat predictable human tactics, but Leo's team was anything but predictable. As they moved deeper into the flagship, the tension continued to rise. They could hear the hum of the AI systems as they navigated the ship's corridors. Each step brought them closer to their goal, but the danger was ever present. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. A single slip-up could mean certain death. Finally, they reached the heart of the flagship. The core was heavily guarded, surrounded by a series of energy barriers that would take down any intruder within seconds. Leo's team was prepared for this moment. They had studied the ship's design and knew exactly where the weak points were. It was time to launch their surprise strike. Without warning, Leo gave the signal. His team moved in fast, disabling the energy shields with precision. They fought their way to the core, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat with the Krivarian soldiers who had been deployed to stop them. Each movement was calculated, each strike precise. The ship shuddered as explosions rocked the interior. Leo's heart raced as he heard the deafening sounds of battle around him. The Krivarian forces were regrouping, but Leo wasn't about to back down now. This was their moment. The team planted charges on the core, setting the timer to ensure that the flagship would be crippled. With the charges set, they made their way to the escape route. But as they neared the exit, the Krivarian forces launched a full assault, and the team found themselves surrounded. Leo gritted his teeth. This wasn't the end. Not yet. The stage was set for a fierce battle, and the fight for humanity's survival had only just begun. As Leo and his team pushed forward in the heart of the Krigarian flagship, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The hum of the ship's advanced systems surrounded them, a constant reminder of the overwhelming power the Krigarians wielded. But the human soldiers didn't falter. They were used to being the underdogs, always outnumbered, always outgunned. That was why they fought so hard, why they never gave up. They knew what was at stake. But nothing could have prepared Leo for the moment that would shatter his world. It was then that disaster struck. Bonner, Leo's closest friend, fell. They had been making their way down a narrow corridor when suddenly An entire squad of Krygarian soldiers appeared, weapons raised, ready to strike. Without hesitation, Bonner dove in front of Leo, pushing him out of harm's way. The blast that followed was deadly, and Bonner took the full force of the explosion. Leo's heart skipped a beat as he watched his friend crumble to the ground. "Bonner!" Leo shouted, rushing to his side. He could see the blood staining Bonner's uniform, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. It was clear that the blast had torn through him, and there was no way he would survive. Bonner managed a weak smile as Leo knelt beside him. His breath was labored, his face pale from the loss of blood, but his eyes were still filled with that familiar spark. The spark that had made him a hero in Leo's eyes, a true friend, a warrior, and a brother in arms. "Leo, you have to finish it," Bonner whispered, his voice barely audible. "You have to take down the Krygarians, for all of us." Tears blurred Leo's vision, but he fought to hold them back. "I won't let them get away with this, Bonner. I swear, I'll make them pay for what they've done." Bonner's hand weakly gripped Leo's, a final gesture of friendship. "Do it for humanity," he said softly, his eyes closing. Leo squeezed Bonner's hand tightly, willing him to stay awake, but he knew it was pointless. His friend was slipping away. There was no more time. With one final breath, Bonner exhaled, and his hand fell limp in Leo's grip. The loss hit Leo like a sledgehammer. His world seemed to crumble around him as the reality of what had just happened set in. Bonner was gone. His closest friend, his brother, had sacrificed his life so that the mission could continue. And now, Leo was alone. The team was alone. But Leo knew that he couldn't afford to mourn. Not now. Not yet. Bonner's death had to mean something. It had to fuel their fight. He could almost hear Bonner's voice urging him on, telling him to finish the mission. They had to stop the Krygarians, not just for Bonner, but for all of humanity. With a heavy heart, Leo stood, wiping the tears from his eyes. He looked around at his team, Sergeant Madison, Corporal Rivers, and the others. They were all looking at him, waiting for him to lead them. They knew what had just happened, and they felt the loss as deeply as he did. But they were soldiers. They had a mission, and they wouldn't stop until it was completed. "Bonner's sacrifice will not be in vain," Leo said, his voice steady despite the grief threatening to overwhelm him. "We finish this. For him. For humanity." The team nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They would carry on Bonner's legacy, no matter the cost. They would fight until the end. As they pressed on, the danger grew. The Krygarian forces were not going to let them escape easily. The ship's security systems went into full lockdown, and the team found themselves fighting their way through increasingly hostile environments. Every turn was a deadly gamble. Every corner held the potential for another ambush. The grief was still there, lurking just beneath the surface, but the team was determined. They pushed forward, drawing strength from Bonner's sacrifice. The human spirit, they knew, was more powerful than any weapon the Krygarians could throw at them. They had lost one of their own, but they weren't going to lose the fight. They reached the central command room, the heart of the Krygarian flagship. The door slid open with a hiss, and the team stormed in, weapons drawn, ready for the final confrontation. But what they saw took their breath away. Standing before them was the Krygarian commander, an imposing figure, his eyes glowing with an eerie blue light, a symbol of the cold, calculating AI that controlled his every move. He looked down at them with disdain, as if their presence was nothing more than a fleeting annoyance. "I've been expecting you," the commander said in a voice that sent chills down Leo's spine. "You humans are always so predictable. You think you can defeat us, but you are nothing compared to the might of the Krygarian Empire." Leo's jaw clenched, his fists tightening around his weapon. "We're not going down without a fight," he said, his voice low and filled with anger. The battle that ensued was brutal. The Krygarian commander was unlike any enemy Leo had ever faced. His movements were swift, calculated, and almost inhuman. He was a product of the AI, a being who had no fear, no weakness. But the human team fought with everything they had, fueled by the memory of their fallen comrade, Bonner. As the fight raged on, Leo's mind was consumed by thoughts of his friend. Every blow he struck, every shot he fired, was for Bonner, for the sacrifice he had made. And as the commander fell, defeated by their combined efforts, Leo couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. The victory was sweet, but it came at a heavy cost. The Crivarian flagship was crippled, but the war was far from over. The human forces had won a battle, but the greater war raged on, and Leo knew that the fight would never stop, not until the Crivarians were defeated for good. The mission was a success, but the emotional toll had been immense. The team had lost one of their own, but they had fought on, showing the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. They would never forget Bonner's sacrifice, and they would continue to fight in his memory, knowing that the cost of victory was steep, but the price of failure would be far worse. As they made their way back to their ship, Leo glanced out at the stars, the weight of their journey pressing down on him. He knew there would be more battles ahead, but for now, he could only think of one thing, his friend, and the promise he had made to avenge his death. The Crivarian flagship was unlike anything Leo had ever seen before. The massive warship seemed to stretch endlessly before him, its dark, metallic hull illuminated by the glow of hundreds of flashing systems. It was a symbol of the Crivarian Empire's terrifying power, cold, calculating, and ruthless. As Leo and his team boarded the main deck, the air grew thick with tension. They knew that what lay ahead was going to be unlike any battle they'd faced before. Their mission was simple: disable the flagship's central AI core and destroy the ship before it could launch a full-scale attack on Earth. But as soon as they set foot on the main deck, Leo realized just how difficult that task was going to be. Before them stood the most advanced weapon the Crivarians had, a massive AI-controlled mech, standing over 30 feet tall. Its gleaming armor glowed ominously in the dim lighting, its body bristling with devastating weapons. It was a giant, a machine designed to crush anything in its path, and it was controlled by the same AI that had relentlessly pursued them throughout the flagship. The mech's glowing red eyes locked onto Leo and his team, and before they could react, it raised its massive cannon, charging up for an attack. The sound of the weapon charging was deafening, and Leo's heart raced in his chest. The mech was fast, far faster than any machine of its size had any right to be. It was a product of Crivarian technology, and it was lethal. "Take cover," Leo shouted, diving behind a large metal structure as the mech unleashed a devastating barrage of energy blasts. The air shimmered with the heat of the blasts, and the deck shook with every hit. Leo's team scrambled to find cover, but they knew they had to act fast. The mech was only the first obstacle. There were bound to be more AI-controlled defenses ahead. The battle quickly escalated as the mech advanced, its massive feet thundering against the deck. Its weapons were devastating. Energy blasts, machine gun fire, and even missiles rained down on the team. The Crivarians had clearly designed this ship to be a fortress, and every corner seemed to hold more dangers than the last. But Leo's team was human, and humans, when cornered, were always at their most dangerous. Madison, Rivers, set up the explosives. Leo ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I'll take care of the mech." His team quickly got to work, setting up explosives near the ship's core, while Leo turned his attention to the massive AI-controlled machine. He knew that brute force wouldn't work against something like this. The mech's armor was far too strong, and its weaponry too deadly. But Leo had something the Crivarians didn't: human ingenuity. He activated the experimental cloaking device they had salvaged from a previous mission. The device shimmered around him, rendering him nearly invisible to the mech's sensors. Leo moved silently, creeping around the back of the machine while it focused on his team. He knew that if he could disable the mech's power core, it would go down, but that wasn't going to be easy. The mech's eye wasn't stupid. It was constantly adjusting, predicting his movements, and countering every move he made. But Leo was patient. He had learned long ago that sometimes the best weapon wasn't brute force, it was strategy. As the mech fired another round of energy blasts, Leo found his opening. The machine's core was located on its back, heavily armored, but with one weak spot, its power conduit. If he could get to it, he could disable the mech entirely. With a burst of speed, Leo sprinted towards the mech's cloaking device still active. He ducked behind its massive legs, barely avoiding the blasts that ripped through the air. He had only a few seconds before the mech would detect him, so he took a deep breath and leaped onto the machine's back, scaling its massive frame with the precision of a trained soldier. As he reached the power core, he drew a small device from his belt, a powerful EMP grenade. He knew that a direct hit would overload the mech's systems, disabling it long enough for his team to destroy it. But just as he was about to plant the grenade, the mech seemed to anticipate his move. It pivoted suddenly, throwing Leo off balance. He barely managed to hang on, his fingers gripping the smooth metal surface as the machine shook violently. The mech's AI responded with lightning speed, unleashing a barrage of missiles aimed directly at Leo's position. He was forced to roll to the side, narrowly dodging the explosion that followed. The shockwave from the blast threw him back, but Leo managed to regain his footing just in time. His team had done their part. They had planted the explosives, and now it was up to him to disable the mech. The battle raged on around him as the mech fired relentlessly. But Leo wasn't giving up. Not now, not after everything they had been through. He activated the cloaking device once again and slipped behind the mech, using the distraction of his team's gunfire to close the distance. With a final leap, Leo reached the power core, planting the EMP grenade with expert precision. He jumped back just as the mech's systems began to overload, the glow of its power core flickering wildly. The explosion that followed was massive, the shockwave rippling through the flagship as the mech's body crumpled to the ground. For a moment, the entire deck seemed to tremble under the impact. The team gathered quickly, their faces filled with exhaustion, but also a sense of triumph. They had taken down the first of many threats, but they knew this was just the beginning. The flagship was still filled with AI-controlled drones, robotic defenders, and even more mechs. But they had proven something in that moment. They had shown the Krygarians that no matter how advanced their technology was, they couldn't outsmart human determination. As they advanced deeper into the flagship, the team continued to face wave after wave of robotic defenders, each more dangerous than the last. The Krygarian AI seemed to anticipate their every move, sending new waves of machines to cut them off at every turn. But Leo and his team kept pushing forward, using their wits and their experience to outmaneuver the machines at every step. The visuals were cinematic. Explosions erupted throughout the flagship as the team fought their way deeper into the heart of the ship. The cold, mechanical corridors were filled with the sound of gunfire, the hum of energy blasts, and the screech of metal on metal as the humans and machines clashed. Each new enemy was more advanced, more lethal, but the humans didn't falter. They fought with everything they had, knowing that if they stopped now, it would all be for nothing. The good versus evil conflict was clearer than ever. The Krygarians, with their cold, calculating AI, were relentless in their pursuit of domination. But the humans, fueled by their spirit, their ingenuity, and the memory of those they had lost, refused to give in. They would fight until the very end. As they moved closer to the heart of the flagship, Leo knew that the final battle was approaching. The AI was strong, but humanity was stronger, and they would prove it, no matter the cost. Leo's heart pounded in his chest as the hours dragged on. They were on the brink of failure. The mission had already cost them dearly. Bonner was gone, their resources were almost depleted, and the Krygarian forces just seemed to be growing stronger with every passing minute. The flagship's defenses were nearly impenetrable, and the AI-controlled drones relentlessly attacked their every move. Leo's team was tired, battered, and on the verge of losing hope. They had pushed as far as they could, but the battle was far from over. As they approached the central control room of the flagship, Leo's mind raced. They had already destroyed several crucial systems, taken down mechs, and fought off waves of robotic defenders. But they still hadn't reached the heart of the Krygerian Eye, the core system that controlled everything. Without taking out the core, they had no chance of destroying the Krygerian fleet. They couldn't let the flagship survive. If it did, Earth and every other planet in the galaxy would be doomed. As the team entered the control room, the massive AI network began to activate its defenses in earnest. The room was filled with a soft, constant hum, the sound of hundreds of interconnected systems working in perfect synchronization. It was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Krygerian Eye had near omnipotent control over the entire fleet, from the smallest drones to the massive warships. The entire operation was controlled by a single, unyielding intelligence. The scene inside the control room was chaotic. Explosions rocked the outer sections of the flagship, sending tremors through the walls. The air was thick with the smell of burnt circuitry and the buzzing of malfunctioning systems. Leo knew that they had little time. They had to move fast. "All right, we don't have much time," Leo said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We've been pushing forward for too long. It's now or never. We need to find a way to disable the Eye." The team moved quickly, setting up their limited tech to breach the Eye's core systems. The room was a high-tech fortress, filled with blinking lights, holographic screens, and countless cables that snaked across the floor like the veins of the ship itself. It was all connected, a sprawling web of technology that spanned the entire Krygerian fleet. But with every second that passed, Leo knew the chances of success were dwindling. "We can't just brute force our way through," Madison, the team's tech specialist, said, her face illuminated by the glowing screens. "This AI is too smart for that. We need to trick it, find a weak spot, a vulnerability." Leo's mind whirred as he processed her words. What could they do? The Krygerian Eye had been designed to adapt, to learn from every attack, every failure. It was practically invincible. But Leo had been thinking about this for hours. He had been piecing together fragments of information they had gathered, the patterns they had noticed in the way the AI reacted. And then it hit him, a weakness in the AI's programming that they hadn't noticed before. "The AI responds to commands as if they're absolute," Leo said, his voice filled with sudden realization. "But it doesn't recognize false commands as errors. It just processes them. If we can trick it into thinking we've given it an order to overload its own systems, it will do it without even realizing." Madison's eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. "You're saying we can trick the AI into destroying itself?" Leo nodded, his gaze locked on the flickering holographic displays in front of him. "Exactly. But we have to move fast. Once we send the command, the AI will try to fix it, but it won't be able to. It's too integrated into the system. It will overload." The plan was risky, too risky. But Leo had no other choice. They were at the final stage of their mission. If this didn't work, everything they had fought for would be lost. The team quickly began setting up their equipment, transferring data, and bypassing security protocols. The room was a blur of activity as Madison and Rivers worked furiously to access the AI's core systems. Leo kept a constant eye on the clock, knowing that the longer they took, the more likely the Krygerian forces would discover their presence and stop them. As Madison hacked into the system, a tense silence fell over the room. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back now. The holographic displays flickered as the team fought against the clock, trying to get the AI to accept the false command without triggering an alarm. Every second felt like an eternity. And then it happened. "Command accepted," Madison said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're in." The room erupted in chaos as the AI's core system began to process the false command. The lights dimmed, and the control room shook as if the entire flagship had been struck by a powerful shockwave. The holographic screens flared to life, displaying cryptic data streams and flashing error messages. It was working. But just as the team thought they had won, the AI fought back. The massive network of systems began to reject the false command, trying to fix the overload. But it was too late. The AI was caught in its own trap. Brace for impact. Leo shouted as the flagship systems started to collapse under the strain of the overloaded AI. Sparks flew from the consoles as the entire ship seemed to tremble, as though it were on the verge of disintegrating. Outside, the explosions intensified. The Crivarian warships in orbit began to lose power, their weapons shutting down as the flagship's control systems failed. The tide was turning. But the battle wasn't over yet. The flagship's self-destruct sequence had been triggered. The countdown had begun. Get to the escape pods. Now. Leo yelled, his voice filled with urgency. The team scrambled, racing toward the nearest exit as the room continued to shake violently. They could hear the explosion growing closer, the walls groaning under the strain of the failing systems. The escape pods were their only chance. As they ran, the flagship seemed to come alive with the sound of its final death throes. The walls rattled, the lights flickered, and the entire structure seemed to be tearing itself apart. The ship was going down. They'd barely made it to the escape pods in time. Leo could hear the countdown ticking in his ear as they strapped in and prepared for launch. The ship's self-destruct sequence was nearly complete. And then, in a flash of blinding light, the flagship exploded in a fiery ball of energy. The shockwave rippled through space, sending debris and fragments of the warship tumbling into the void. Leo's escape pod rocketed away. The team safe for the moment, but the destruction of the Crigarian flagship had only just begun. The mission was a success, but it had come at a cost. They had lost good men and women, and the fight was far from over. But as Leo looked out the window of the escape pod at the remnants of the Crigarian fleet, he knew one thing for sure. Humanity had struck back, and this was only the beginning. The stars stretched out before Leo, vast and endless, like an infinite ocean. It was hard to believe that not long ago, these same stars were a silent witness to the tyranny of the Crigarian Empire, an empire controlled by an AI that had enslaved millions of beings across the galaxy. But now, after everything that had happened, that power was broken. The Crivarian fleet had been shattered, and the galaxy was free. Humanity had proven to the universe that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could fight, endure, and ultimately triumph. Leo gazed out of the observation window of the ship, his mind still processing everything that had happened. It had been a long, brutal journey, one filled with sacrifice and loss. His heart ached for the friends he had lost, especially Bonner. The man had given everything for the mission, and now he was gone. Leo's fingers gently traced the dog tags around his neck, a reminder of the brother he had lost. He had promised Bonner that he would avenge him, and he had. But there was no real victory without paying the cost. The final push had been intense. Leo and his team had managed to infiltrate the Crigarian flagship and trick the AI into destroying itself, but the road to that victory had been fraught with danger. The AI had fought back harder than they had anticipated, and they had almost lost everything in the process. But in the end, they had succeeded. The flagship had exploded, taking with it the heart of the Crigarian fleet. Their mission was complete, but at what cost? As Leo sat in silence, the rest of the team gathered around. They had done it. They had won. But there was no celebration, not yet. For all their triumphs, there was still a weight in the air, a heaviness that couldn't be shaken. They had lost comrades along the way, and it was time to honor them. The memorial ceremony was small, held in the quietest corner of the ship. Leo stood at the front, his eyes fixed on the simple wooden plaques that bore the names of the fallen. Bonner's name stood at the forefront. the name Leo would never forget. The others, Madison, Rivers, and the rest of the crew, had each left their mark in this battle, sacrificing everything for the greater good. They had given their lives so that humanity could have a chance at a future. Leo felt a pang in his chest as he placed his hand on Bonner's plaque. "You would have been proud, my friend," he murmured, his voice barely audible. He could feel the weight of his promise to Bonner, the promise to never forget and to continue fighting. And now, with the victory secured, Leo vowed to keep that promise. Humanity's fight was not over. It had only just begun. As the memorial concluded, the team stood together in quiet reflection. Each person had their own thoughts, their own way of dealing with the loss. Some turned away, their eyes wet with unused tears. Others stood tall, their faces set with determination. But no one spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them spoke volumes. It was a silence that carried the weight of everything they had lost, but also everything they had won. The following days were filled with more formal ceremonies. Humanity's victory had sent ripples throughout the galaxy. The Krivarian Empire's reign of terror had come to an end, and the galaxy could now breathe a collective sigh of relief. The once feared eye-controlled ships were now nothing more than drifting husks in space, their power extinguished forever. As the news spread across Earth, the celebrations began. Crowds gathered in the streets, waving flags and cheering for the heroes who had saved them all. The government held a ceremony in honor of Leo and his team, calling them the saviors of humanity. But Leo wasn't interested in fame or accolades. He had already seen the true cost of their victory, and no amount of recognition could replace the friends they had lost. Still, there was a part of him that allowed himself a moment of peace. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to smile. Humanity had faced the greatest threat imaginable and had come out on top. The Krivarians had underestimated them. The AI had thought it could control the galaxy, but in the end, it was the ingenuity, resilience, and bravery of the human spirit that had triumphed. As the days passed, the celebrations continued. People gathered in parks and plazas to remember the sacrifices that had been made, to celebrate the new future that was now possible. Leo watched from a distance, observing the unity of the people. It was a sight he would never forget. In the face of adversity, humanity had stood together. It had not been easy, and the scars of the battle would remain for a long time. But now, Earth and the galaxy had hope again. One evening, Leo stood alone on the balcony of his apartment, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the skyline. The streets below were bustling with people, the air filled with the sounds of celebration. But Leo wasn't focused on that. His mind was elsewhere, lost in thought. He thought about the future, about what came next. The Krivarian threat had been neutralized, but there were still other dangers in the universe. The galaxy was a vast, unpredictable place. There were still countless challenges ahead, and Leo knew that humanity's fight for freedom was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. They had won, and that victory was something that would resonate through the ages. It wasn't just a victory for Earth, it was a victory for every world that had been oppressed, every race that had suffered under the rule of the Krivarians. Leo took a deep breath, his gaze rising to the stars once again. They were bright and beautiful, full of promise and possibility. For the first time in his life, he truly believed that humanity could accomplish anything. They had taken down the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. And now, they could do anything. But as Leo stood there, watching the stars, a part of him knew that the fight wasn't over. The universe was vast, and new threats would inevitably arise. But humanity had shown that they could stand strong in the face of overwhelming odds. They had proven that no matter how advanced an enemy might be, no matter how insurmountable the odds, humanity would always find a way to fight back. As the final moments of the day faded into night, Leo felt a sense of finality. The battle for the galaxy had been won, But humanity's journey was just beginning. There was still much to be done, many challenges to face. But as he looked up at the stars, Leo knew one thing for certain: humanity would never back down. They would always stand strong, united in their resolve to protect their future. And with that thought, Leo stepped away from the balcony, ready for whatever the future would bring. The fight for freedom had just begun, but Leo and his team had shown the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The universe had been changed forever, and humanity would always stand as a beacon of hope in the darkness.